everyone. Welcome to the Carolina Weather Group. This is the Wednesday, March 7th, 2018 edition of our little weather get-together, and we're happy to have Dr. Cody. He's a storm surge specialist with the National Hurricane Center. So Cody is located in warm, lovely Miami, where the rest of us, well, we're digging out of the winter chill. And talking about that, we'll bring in Peter here in just a little bit, who has experienced not one but two nor'easters, and it looks like he may have a third one coming up towards the end of the weekend. But before we do that, our live broadcast tonight, there's many ways that you can watch that. Our Facebook Live Periscope is currently streaming, or you may be watching on our YouTube page. And if you're listening to the podcast maybe a few days from now, thank you for doing that. And we'll let our guest at the end of the show give out information how you can reach them there at the National Hurricane Center and the Storm Surge Unit. I'll get it out here in just a second. So it's been like we said, an active week, especially for some of us here on the panel. So I'm going to toss it up to Peter, who's in South Jersey. Peter, I think you've had a little bit of everything, haven't you, in the past couple of days?
It has been absolutely insane here. That's all I could say. Two nor'easters within 1 week. I don't know if that's ever happened. That's just insane. But we did have a pretty bad storm. I'm sure you all heard about that last Friday. We had wind gusts 60, 70 miles an hour, especially along the coast, with a little bit of snow. It wasn't too bad, but the wind was the biggest thing. It knocked down two of my trees. So that tells you how bad it was. But today we had another nor'easter. The snow was worse this time. And let me do some pictures here. Why not? So you can all join in on my horrible experience today. Did give me a day off, so that is a plus. But yeah, we had some whiteout conditions today. This morning, it's actually a whole mix of everything. Every minute I was looking out the window was something different, from mixing to rain to snow. It was going back and forth. But all afternoon we had thunder, lightning, heavy snow, whiteout conditions. It was just terrible. So this was the backyard. You can see winter wonderland pretty much. And this was also a little video here of when we had one of the most intense snow bands come through. It was pretty bad driving around today. So kind of just changed quick, the weather conditions. So it was fun. And now we're going to be looking at another one possibly on Monday. So I guess 3 times the charm, huh? Maybe I'll get another day off. So we'll see. But yeah, I can't wait for the winter to be over.
They say all things come in 3, and so there you go.
Yes, that's right.
We'll pop that one off. I'll bring in Eric next. Eric's in the Memphis, Tennessee area. Eric, you as well have had a little bit of active weather with lots of rain and some flooding in your area.
Yes, we have. We finished the month of February with almost 13 and a half inches of rain for the month, which broke the old February record by a couple of inches. We're glad to put February behind us and move into March, but that does leave behind quite a bit of water. Especially down the Mississippi. This is normal springtime flood season, but this morning we cracked into the top 10 crests on the Mississippi River here at Memphis and into the top 10. So it is about 6 feet above flood stage, a lot of backwater flooding into some of the tributaries and stuff, but fortunately not a lot of houses that are threatened or businesses or anything. So we're thankful for that and just ready to have a few dry days between the normal springtime rains and fronts that we start getting at this time of year.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was in your area this past week, and just crazy how much flooding in the Memphis area. And then as you went into Arkansas, it was even worse. So hopefully you guys can dry out here soon and get some nice sunny weather. And let's go down to the great state of Texas. We'll bring in Ashley tonight. Ashley, how's things in your area?
Doing great. I don't have too much to report. We're looking at 60s, 70s, and then maybe even 80s on Saturday. We're going to get a little bit of moisture, so we might have some slight rain or thunderstorm chances this weekend, but really nothing any tragic at all. I'm just excited about the warmth, and I'm ready for storm season. So
let's all throw our tomatoes at once at Ashley right now.
Yeah, don't rub it in, okay?
No fun. Thank you, Ashley. Let's bring in our Carolina people, and we'll start off in the Raleigh area. Jordan, you are anticipating some good weather, but also anticipating that Carolina game coming up soon, right?
You bet I am. ACC tournament time. Yeah, I mean, after a ridiculously warm February, we're kind of back in the winter pattern again. We've had a couple of cold air damming events in the past week that have been pretty miserable to live through, but it's something we deal with here in the Carolinas pretty frequently. But the other big thing is, let's see, the end of last week going into the weekend, we had a pretty severe windstorm associated with the nor'easter developing off the coast. We had 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gust here in the Triangle. One tree actually fell across Franklin Street in Chapel Hill, down some power lines, and basically the Southeast Regional Climate Center office where I work, it was shut down for the day. So I actually had to go work on campus at the library for most of the day. So that was not too fun. I couldn't access any of my office files, but all is back to normal this week.
I know we were tweeting earlier. I hate you didn't get the rest of the day off. That's what they should have done, right?
I know, right? The joy of being a state employee.
That's right. Well, let's go down I-85 just a little bit. We'll bring in James Brierton. James, you and I are pretty close together in the Charlotte metro area. I'm wondering, is your allergy starting to bother you like mine? Pollen's in the air.
You're absolutely right, Scotty, and I think I noticed it for the first time 2 days ago and almost went to the store to buy Claritin. And then I said, well, on Tuesday it's going to rain. Let's see what happens on Wednesday. Today was all right, but I think either way it's probably about time I start stocking up on the allergy meds. So I'm glad it's not just me, Scotty.
Yes, it is time. 'Tis the season for that. Let's bring in our Charleston guys, Jared and Shay. How's things going down there in the Low Country? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's we actually got some rain last night. We've been abnormally dry, to use the drought monitor term, for the better part of the last couple months, and after our fun snow event in January, back below normal. It's going to be we're dealing possibly with some frost concerns, maybe some freeze concerns further inland. Just a bit of a roller coaster. We've been getting on the tail end of these nor'easters. They've been very disappointing when it comes to rainfall, although we did get 1/10 of an inch of rain overnight, just enough to rinse some of that pollen away and excite the plants to produce new pollen. So suffice to say, lots of Flonase, lots of off-brand Claritin from Costco. You get them in the drums. You get them in bulk. 4 years worth in one thing for like $20. So I mean, it works out. But not too bad. Otherwise, nothing too crazy. And back to you, Scotty.
Thanks, Jared. And I'll bring in Shay here now. I think I saw Shay a couple of nights ago on Twitter dancing around like crazy man because Charleston's going back to the NCAA tournament. No, I'm just kidding about that. But Shay, I know you was really excited about your alma mater.
Yeah. College of Charleston won they won their game and they got into the tourney. So that's a big deal. They haven't been in the tourney. I can't remember the last time they were. It wasn't that long ago, but it's always 99. Exciting to see. Was it 99? Right. Okay.
It was 99.
So that was kind of a long time ago. Okay. Yeah. Because there was 1 year when all the South Carolina teams went in and that was a big deal. But, usually they end up making it to the NIT. Either way, it's exciting to see them make it to the big tourney and hope they do the best. Hope they win it all. That would be, the Cinderella move there. But yeah, to supplement what Jaron was saying, we've had some fairly mild weather here, not quite enough rain as we would like with all the pollen. It looked like droves of paint on the ground. Yellow paint is how the way that the rain sort of puddled everything together. So going out this morning, I was like, wow, that was a lot of pollen. But one thing to note is that our sea surface temperatures, we had some record warmth last week, and our sea surface temperatures has come up it got up to about 64 degrees and went back down to about 59 to 60. But that did allow for the sea breeze circulations to really crank up along the coast. We had a couple of days. We had backdoor sea breeze oscillations. We had sea breeze circulations from the south. So we're seeing some winds really the microclimate winds starting to sort of turn on along the coast a little bit early this year. Sea surface temperature is right about normal, but it's good to see the return of that warm weather kind of climate come back. So we'll see what happens here the next few weeks. I wouldn't be surprised to have another cold snap or two, but we thought that might happen towards the end of February, beginning of March, and we were dead wrong. So that's it's the tricky part about the Southeast, and especially along the coastline here in March. You just never know. As far as the INSO predictions, we're still on track, and the report hasn't come out quite yet. It might come out tomorrow for 55% chance March through May season, those 3 months right in there for the La Nina to fade to an INSO neutral phase, and that would go on most likely through the entire summer. So we were in neutral last year. We could have another active hurricane season this year. It's really hard to tell. We may ask our guest about this here in the show tonight, but I think for the most part, we're just kind of cruising right into neutral phase from the Pacific, and things are really up in the air for this year. Back to you, Scotty.
All right, Shay, thank you for that. Let's bring in our guest tonight, Dr. Cody Fritz with us. He is from the Storm Surge Unit there at the National Hurricane Center. Cody, welcome to the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So as we do with our first new guest, we told you, well, no, I'm just kidding. We would like to know, though, our first question to our first-time guests are, how did you catch the weather bug? What got you interested? Tell us a little bit about your weather history and a little bit about you before we go into tonight's topic.
Oh, you got time for that? I'm not sure we I would say just like anybody else, started when I was young, had a passion for the weather, kind of deviated though. I started taking interest in other math, science-y type professions, but I found it again. So, sophomore year of college, I kind of switched from engineering to meteorology, and then the road kind of took me on its own. It's kind of bumpy along the way, but eventually I found a path, did my PhD, got lucky, I guess is what you could say, and got to the Hurricane Center and kind of just took over with storm surge. I mean, my background is in tropical meteorology, so I guess it kind of works out, but I don't know.
We was looking through your biography, and I noticed that you had a stint at the National Weather Service in Charleston as an intern.
I did. Yeah. So as a Holland Scholar, you get to kind of pick, where you want to go for a summer internship. And I kind of just, had interest in going to Charleston. I liked what they were doing, and they were picked me, which I'm happy for. And then, made some good friends, definitely good friends. It was a great experience. Still know those guys to this day. So yeah, it was good. And that's one of the reasons why I love Charleston. So spending the summer there was amazing. Yeah.
Did you work with Richard Thacker or Pete Mullen?
Oh, no.
Those names ring a bell?
No. If they do, and I'm sorry no, but they don't.
That's all right. They have a few guys have been there quite a while, so that's good. Yeah, Charleston office. We love our guys here in Charleston.
Is Richard? Is he a lead forecaster?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think remember him. But I worked a lot with Steve Taylor, and call him John Q. But he's no longer there. I think he moved to Columbia. And I was good friends with the Sioux, the former Sioux, Frank Alsheimer. Mm-hmm. So those guys, yeah.
Great crew.
Yeah, definitely great crew. Yeah, enjoyed it.
In fact, speaking of which, real quick mention about that while we're on it is they are starting their Riptide currents forecasting March 15th. So that may coincide with what your studies are with Storm Surge Unit. But that's when they're officially starting the season this year, 15th.
Oh, okay.
Well, Cody, let's talk a little bit about the Storm Surge Unit. You guys are there in the National Hurricane Center. Kind of give our listeners who may not know before we do that, let's do this.
Okay.
For our followers or listeners who may not understand or may not live at the coast, don't really know what Storm Surge is. Let's talk about Storm Surge first, and then kind of transition into what you guys do there at the office on any given day.
Okay. Anyway, so I guess on any given day, we're kind of multidisciplinary, if you will, in Storm Surge, kind of a unique group. We kind of usually break down our task into three kind of situations where during the season, when there's hurricanes or there's a landfall, we're definitely operational. So when there's a landfalling event, we come in, we forecast storm surge. That's no surprise. And then the other part of what we do is a lot of research and development. So not only in the off season, but even when there's some downtime, we're always constantly working on the storm surge model, trying to improve the basins or the grid that it kind of runs on, just to improve it, make it better, that kind of thing. And then outside of that, we spend a lot of time, especially right now, doing outreach, educational outreach, educating emergency managers on the products, what they mean, what it says, how to interpret it, that kind of thing. A lot of travel, more outreach, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a little short.
That's okay. And for our followers who may live in the Piedmont areas or in the mountains or whatever, don't really live around the coast. When you're forecasting, for storm surge, kind of explain to our viewers maybe what storm surge is, and then we can kind of get into some of the products that you guys issue during the tropic season.
Yeah, so storm surge is simply the abnormal rise of water due to a hurricane or a tropical cyclone or that kind of thing, any wind forcing water and pushing water towards the land. So any abnormal rise of water outside of the astronomical tide, we call that storm surge. And if you were to add the tide, we kind of call sturge plus tide storm tide, if that makes any sense. So, and anywhere along the United States coastline and other coastal areas are pretty susceptible to storm surge.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about what you guys do. I know last year you started a new product with issuing storm surge watches and warnings. Talk about maybe what the criteria is for those watches and warnings, and then maybe how you guys go about disseminating that information to the public.
Yeah, so I can say for the first time this year, we issued the first ever storm surge watch warning. So we've kind of deviated from grouping watches and warnings with the wind. So we wanted to separate it because it's a different hazard. For a storm surge watch, we usually say that that's the possibility of life-threatening surge occurring in any given area that we've outlined. And that's usually issued about 48 hours before the hazard occurs. The storm surge warning is where we have the danger of life-threatening storm surge within 36 hours of that hazard occurring. And generally, how we disseminate that information is through, we can provide an interactive graphic that kind of shows that. We also can send out information via, the weather service and that kind of thing. So.
Very cool. I have to unmute myself.
Oh, okay. I was like, did I lose you?
No. So tell us a little bit about maybe, I know Ashley is in emergency management. So when you guys look at these products and you see these storms coming in, how do you communicate with maybe the local city and state governments and stuff like that as we're watching an approaching hurricane?
Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. So in general, the best we can do is we provide the information, and we have a great team inside the Hurricane Center, the Hurricane Liaison Team, or the FEMA. And so we work closely with them, provide them with information, and they kind of coordinate with their local EMs and other emergency managers as well. We do provide briefings to local officials and that kind of thing as well.
So I want to ask you about the interactive maps that you have. And usually whenever a hurricane, we get a named storm or named tropical cyclone, these storm surge maps become available on your NHC sites per update, and they're active. And right now I'm going to share the screen. This is the ArcGIS viewer. This is an interactive map that's available. And just sort of tell us about this map and how the public could use this to their advantage. Is this something that's ongoing regardless of tropical cyclone development, or just when cyclones are developed and have been named?
Right. So this is our National Storm Surge Hazard Maps. Now these maps are available 24/7 all the time. And really what this information is showing you is it's showing you the risk potential, the vulnerability, given a certain category of storms. So for any given category, that's basically showing you the maximum amount of surge you can see, not only in value, but the extent. These are pre-computed maps, pre-computed composites that represent the maximum value of storm surge, both in value and extent for any given category of storm. And so as if you were to sequence through those category 1 through 5, you can see the differences in what, say, any given category 5 or any given category 4 can produce as far as surge is concerned. So these are mentioned just to inform the public, not only the public, but any local officials and media. And this is the risk potential, obviously, for any given storm. And so the values are color coded within 3-foot increments. Obviously, anything but greater than 9 feet is not. Generally, nobody cares. That's pretty significant.
So I have a question about these maps. You guys are always great at making wonderful products, maps, graphics, and things like that. And I'm an emergency manager, but I'm not quite on the coast, so I don't look into this as much as other emergency managers do. But how do you ensure that emergency managers are able to see all of these great products that you guys are putting out? Because I know working with the emergency managers I work with, even if we're just looking at flood data or tornado data or anything like that, a lot of them just don't know this stuff is out there. And a lot of this stuff would really help with decision making. So how do you think that we can reach out better and show these products, or how are you guys doing that currently?
No, that's a great question. So one of the big things that we do as part of our, education and outreach is that we actually we host during this, I would say in the off season, 3 weeks out of the year, we actually bring in local emergency managers to the Hurricane Center and kind of educate them on the products. I mean, granted, these products are new, so we've been trying to do a really as much as we can to inform them and educate them on these products, not only the products, but kind of what they mean and where they can find them. And not only do we do that in the Hurricane Center, but we actually go out, we travel across the country along coastal, areas that are affected by storm surge and do the same thing. We teach them everything we can about storm surge, the forecasting, what it is, what the products are, both in real time and that kind of thing, to kind of give them the best available information that we can, to inform them best we can about what it is they're seeing and how best they can use it and exactly what it means. Because not always, just by looking at it without being educated on or teaching, not everybody understands exactly what's being shown. So it's important that we do our best to educate.
Definitely. Yeah, that's super important.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard too about the Hurricane Center potentially doing exercises with EMs also. Am I correct on that?
No, we do exercises, and we provide material as well for not only national exercises, but local exercises. We're kind of in that process right now where we run these test storms and that produce storm surge, and we provide the products as if it were a real event. So just to give people more of an experience with that type of material.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And Cody, I know last year was a very active season. I know not all of the data is in yet, but just kind of an overall view. How do you think the whole process with the new watch warning process process went? And maybe I think we were talking a little bit earlier. You've got a little bit of data from Harvey that maybe you can talk about.
Yeah. So overall, it was a pretty, I would say it was a successful season for the new products, but it was very impactful in general. So I think it was fun on many, not only us, but obviously the people that were affected by storm surge. I mean, if you look at the season as an overview, I mean, everywhere from the entire Gulf Coast up to the Mid-Atlantic was generally affected by storm surge in some way, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So it was, I would say, a historic year, to say the least. As far as the products were concerned, obviously it was the first time we ever issued a storm surge watch warning, which is remarkable in itself. To separate the wind from the surge has been an endeavor for the past almost decade, and to finally achieve such goals was quite an accomplishment. And one of the great things I would say about having this new storm surge watch warning, or even the potential inundation or the flooding map that we provide as well, which became operational just a couple of years ago, with this new information, I really think this provides better information to protect people, not only that live along the coast, but to provide information to the EMs. But I think it really helps save lives in comparison to previous years. If you just go back to Sandy from 2012, you lost almost 41 people to storm surge, which was a Category 1 hurricane, right? And as far as we know, and as far as right now, preliminary results suggest that 0 lives were lost. And we had 3 major hurricanes, right, just this year, in addition to Hurricane Nate, which produced quite an extensive amount of storm surge, even though it was a Category 1. And to have no deaths, I think that's quite remarkable.
I was going to further that point in saying how wonderful of a job the NHC did with the actual forecasting of the storms this year. Very high success rate. How do you come up with your storm surge in general? Like, I know you have slosh modeling, you have different kinds of modeling that you use, but
right.
Say somebody says, okay, here's the storm. This is a Category 5. Is Miami going to be underwater or what? I mean, how do you come up with the numbers that you do?
So there's a lot of research done on this. When it comes to forecasting storm surge, we like to deviate from this whole deterministic approach and side more on the uncertainty. So that's why we use what we call probabilistic storm surge, or P surge for short. We really need to account for the risk potential, and that means accounting for the uncertainty. In order to do that, we have to account for various changes in, say, the radius and maximum winds of the hurricane, which basically we accommodate for its size. We take into account the bathymetry, and the shape of the coastline, which differs obviously all along the United States. In addition to that, the speed, not only how fast the storm is moving, but basically its direction as well. All those things are accounted for, and we can, from the information, we can create what we call as probabilities, or create a probabilistic storm surge values. So it kind of gives us the risk potential for any given location along the coastline. What would be a near worst case scenario surge amount or surge value for a given area. So I pointed out the flooding map, the inundation graphic that you see that kind of accommodates or kind of coincides with the storm surge watch warning. So that map, so this is P-Surge, what you're showing here. We can take that information, post-process it, and kind of put it onto a nicer, high resolution map in which we actually account for the ground as well, so the height of the ground. So we can give you the storm surge values above ground. I don't know if you have an example of that as well, but that would be the potential flooding map. Anyway, so what we typically show is a near worst case scenario value. So these point probabilities, we show the 10% exceedance. And those values generally mean that there's a 1 in 10 chance of the values that are being shown being exceeded, or a 90% chance, if you want to look at it a different way, 90% chance of it being that value or less. And so this is really meant to be a tool to kind of protect against that uncertainty that might exist.
And just to add to that, it's really good to be able to provide that worst case scenario, because that's how EMs are going to want to make their decisions. They want to know the worst possible outcome, so then they can prepare with the resources and tone it down if it doesn't end up being like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think there were situations this year where it worked. And if you think about Hurricane Irma, I think that was a good example of how, I mean, granted, there was, the forecast was a bit large, but if you take into account that track shift to the east, the eroding eye wall on the west side, some of the surge values didn't materialize. But I mean, they did see up to 10 feet anyway on the forecast, even though it was a little bit higher than that. I mean, there were several reasons for that. The idea is that you just can't account for a deterministic track, because there are so many variables that affect the value or the height of the storm surge that you really have to accommodate or account for that uncertainty.
So
yeah, I wanted to
go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Cody, I wanted to follow up on that, on the P-Surge product and also Ashley's question. So with these probabilistic forecasts, they're a little bit harder for people to kind of understand, you know, that you can't say, well, yes, it's going to do this, or no, it's not going to do that. Who is the kind of the target audience for those probabilistic products? Is it like the emergency managers that are trained a little more? Is it general public? And what was the feedback you got as far as did people understand what they were looking at, or were there a lot of questions, a lot of, you know, trying to figure out, explaining to people, you know, what they're looking at?
Yeah, it's really meant to be a planning tool for local officials, EMs. In addition to the general public, I mean, we also, you know, the storm surge watch warning really helps to pronounce what is life-threatening, and that's really a tool for the general public. But I would also acknowledge that I think that the general, in my short experience with that, I mean, we ran into a couple people down in Key West, and this graphic, you know, they looked at that and they saw the values, and it made them leave. So I do think the general public is aware of it and has used it for their benefit. But really, it's meant for a planning tool. We're showing near worst case scenario values, and so this is meant to show you, you know, not only the uncertainty, but what you kind of should plan for, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
Yeah.
So for our viewers out there, we have a really popular tool that's been used to share information is this. This is from the comment program. I'm just going to push play on this, and you know, feel free to comment on this, Cody, if you want to. It's a general model. Keep in mind that every storm is different, and every category 3 storm may not be the same. But this is the general concept showing the surge in accordance to the wind speeds and the driving force of water. And then we have to factor in tides as well along the coastline. Would you like to comment about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I do want to make one important point that you can't really associate the height of storm surge with a given category of storm, because there are so many different factors, like I said, that can affect the storm surge values. I mean, we've seen, for example, Category 4 storms produce less storm surge than, say, Category 1, just based on where they hit, how big the wind field is, and that kind of thing. I do want to say, I think there might be another comment graphic that I think is really interesting, is that if you look, I think there was a question earlier about, maybe it was before the show, but we talked about Miami and how the storm surge was not as much as you might expect, even though it was a very strong storm. Now, granted, Irma moved a bit southwest, but let's say Irma hit right into Miami. If you took that storm, ran it through Miami, the amount of surge you would get would not match if you ran that storm along the West Coast. And that's simply because of the slope of the bathymetry. So in Miami, you have a very narrow, sharp shelf. And in the Gulf Coast, which is more susceptible to storm surge, it's very gradual, right, wide. And so in those cases, you can produce a lot more storm surge relative to, say, somewhere like Miami, or like a coastal area, for example, like Puerto Rico, an island country or island area like Puerto Rico or Virgin Islands.
And Cody, I heard you mention a little bit ago, you guys went to Key West. Do you guys go out after the hurricane? I know like the local weather offices, they do damage surveys for hurricanes and tornadoes. Do you guys go out to some of the sites where the hurricanes or the storm surge has been so major, and kind of evaluate and see how close you were with your predictions?
Yeah, we do work with other partners in doing that. In the case of Irma, we did make a trip down there to verify some high water marks to see, to get an idea of how high the water got in certain areas. So I can say yes, but we also have other partners that help us with that too. Gotcha.
All right. Well, I know it's about 8:50, so we got a couple more minutes here. As we look, I guess, into next year, from what you guys learned here, do you see any kind of retooling, or do you think everything was set from this year as we go into this upcoming tropical season year? Do you think things will go like they did last year, or have you learned some things that you can implement to this year?
I think you always learn something, to be honest, especially after a season like that. I think we're ready for the next season, to be honest with you. The products we were able to issue on time, every time. But for the next season, yeah, I mean, I guess we're ready. We're as ready as we were for the last one, if that helps.
Are these still in experimental mode, or are you pretty much?
Everything is operational. Yeah. So the potential flooding map and the storm surge watch warning are both operational products now. So in the event that there is a landfall, 48 hours in advance, you'll see these products pop up at every synoptic advisory or official advisory.
So is the new Ghost 16 being very helpful for your efforts?
Definitely. If I were to speak for the hurricane specialists, I think it's been very helpful for them. And that's about all I can I can say about that. But it's been a tremendous help, I think, in identifying various aspects of the hurricane. So.
All right, very cool. Well, do you guys, any of our guests or panelists, have any more questions for Cody?
So, Cody, is the suite of products that you were issuing last year then going to remain the same this year? Are there any tweaks to any of the products themselves that are coming out from your unit?
No, the products will be they'll look the same. So there's no tweaks, to be honest with you. We, as far as P-Surge goes, we always have to update. When I talk about when we have to account for perturbations in the tracks and the speeds and that kind of thing to create these probabilities, those are based on historical errors. So we update those every year. They're based on 5-year averages. So there'll be an update to P-Surge relative to the new errors which then obviously affects the result in the long run.
Well, if there's no changes, that must have meant that things went well, and obviously with 0 deaths attributed to storm surge this year, you guys did a great job. So kudos to the Hurricane Center and all that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Hey, one more for you. It has to do with basically the not so much the storm surge project, but sea level rise. How is that starting to be a factor in what you're doing with your products? I mean, you have to account for, like I said earlier, with tides, but now we're starting to see some of these spring tides, these perigean spring tides that are getting higher and higher as time goes on. It's becoming more of a nuisance problem for the coastlines, especially in the southeast and your neck of the woods in Miami.
Yeah. So when it comes to sea level rise, the idea is if you were to take, let's say, a storm now, and then you raise the sea level, a few centimeters, if you will, or a foot and along, whatever the projections are, that obviously makes the situation extremely, much worse than it would, now versus later, right? So when it comes to storm surge and storm surge forecasting, it's simply if you raise the reference point, raise the water level, you're going to affect more areas much worse than you did before. That's it, simply put.
Interesting. So I'm assuming NOAA Digital Coast is an important component to what you do. Maybe some of their fine tuning high resolution areas of the coastline, or is that something that you don't really get into?
So we are always upgrading or updating the basins. So I don't know if you have that to show either, but we have various slosh grids that go around the coastline. I would say about 30 plus of them. And we are updating those every few years with new digital elevation data, so all that new information gets input into the model.
Hey, Cody, quick question. I know Hurricane Irma last year produced just torrential storm surge in the Jacksonville, Florida area. So Jacksonville's a little interesting in terms of geography as it sits kind of inland a little bit on the St. Johns River. Is it trickier to forecast storm surge for cities that are a little bit inland and that lie along a river when I can imagine you've got freshwater flooding adding, to the river's flow out to sea, but then you have the push of the salt water coming inland. I'm just curious about how to forecast that.
Yeah, that actually is a challenge. When it comes to connecting rivers or the freshwater part with the saltwater part, we're not quite there yet, that capability. Right. And you're right that when you have that onshore flow, it kind of acts like a plug, right? It kind of blocks the river flow. And so if it's raining tremendously, say over Jacksonville or whatnot, and the rivers have to drain, it can create a lot more flooding as a result just by stopping the water as it's trying to flow out the river. That was actually a case for Hurricane Harvey. In Galveston, when you had all that rainwater trying to drain out of the river, you still had some onshore flow. So you didn't have surge so much to say as you had a lot of freshwater flooding because the river was kind of being plugged.
Right.
We can't account for some of that surge initially in the inlets. And so if you were just to have water coming through, like say in the St. Johns River as it wraps around, we can model flooding due to the salt water, but when it comes to the freshwater part, we can't yet connect those.
Got a question from a viewer for you, Rick Iosi from down near your area near Miami. He asked, with the last nor'easter and other notable storms out of the hurricane season where storm surge occurred, allowing larger waves to come in closer to shore, there's more damage, dune recession, and flooding. If suggestions are accurate and such powerful storms are to be more common, are you also taking a look at storm surge phenomenon with these lesser events?
With, say, extratropical storms?
Extratropical, correct.
So I can say that we are strictly with the tropical side. There's no policy yet on who can do or forecast extratropical storm surge events. So as far as right now, the policy is strictly written for us to concentrate mainly on tropical. So not that we're not aware of it, but Yeah.
No, it's good. I mean, I know they're being tracked with some of the other models, the Slosh,
We do have
extra tropical storm surge model. These things are being tracked. So
yeah, we do have other models to model that type of event. As far as obviously the Hurricane Center doesn't provide any forecasts, but local offices do provide, like, coastal advisories or coastal warnings as a result. So.
All right. I think Jared had one more.
Yeah, what is your coordination like with the local offices when you're determining where you're going to set up this storm surge watch or warning, putting it into the grids and everything? How do you rely on their local expertise to help you determine the best placement for those?
That's a really good question, actually. I'm glad you asked that. So when it comes to the storm surge watch warning, one of the really cool things about this product is that when we provide our forecast, we'll actually send our best guess to the local offices. And we will coordinate back and forth, and they will kind of give us their local expertise, and they might change where we put the watch or the warning just a little bit based on how they are familiar with, say, a river inlet or that kind of thing. And then they'll pass that information back to us. And then once we've kind of agreed and finished our coordination, we'll then officially send that out to the country. So there's a lot of coordination when it comes to the storm surge watch warning.
All right. Well, I think that's about all the questions. Cody, we're about to 9 o'clock. And for our followers who are watching tonight, and maybe those who are following along on it, watching later on, or even listening to the podcast a little bit later on, how can folks get in touch with, or maybe not even get in touch, but follow your products there at the Storm Surge unit?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you wanted to contact the Hurricane Center, we have an official email address that you can write to. Do I need to say? I don't know how you can write that down or what. But anyway, it's on. If you go to the National Hurricane Center's webpage and you go to about NHC and then how to contact us, there's a drop-down menu from there, and you can simply contact our public affairs officer, and he can coordinate any questions directly to us or to whoever is the expert on the question that's being asked. As far as the products, I noticed you guys were showing some of the educational resources, but again, on the National Hurricane Center's webpage, under educational resources, there's a drop-down menu. You can look at storm surge, and there's a list of all our products and the information about what they mean and how they're available and whatnot. So.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you, Cody, for joining us. Stick around if you want to. We're going to transition into our tweets of the week, and then kind of talk a little bit about the National Weather Podcast Month going on.
Okay.
So I will open it up to our panelists. Anybody want to start us off with tweet of the week? Do I have theirs pulled up yet? I see everybody feverishly looking for one now. Jared was the first one up that I saw. So Jared, I'll let you take it first.
And I probably stole it from somebody else, so it is what it is. It comes just from our buddy Chris Jackson. Saw this all over the web a few days ago with the first nor'easter. It was a bit of a bumpy ride coming into the Washington, D.C. area. This is a PIREP, the pilot report, for those of you who don't speak acronym. And the PIREP basically goes, you have the pilots are at 4,000 feet, and they're saying moderate to severe turbulence, very bumpy on descent. Pretty much everyone on the plane threw up. Pilots were on the verge of throwing up. So suffice to say, I think it was a little bit turbulent up there. In fact, one of my coworkers was on one of these flights trying to, she did 4 attempts at IAD, 3 attempts at Reagan, and then was diverted to Baltimore, 3 more attempts, and then finally got to the ground safely. So, yeah, not the it's what they train for in the simulators. So I suppose so. So there's that. But yeah, kind of crazy watching some of the crosswind videos out of there, and you really got to give it up to these pilots, and just how much they train, and just how crazy safe it can be to be flying with these folks. But just to make sure you know where the barf bag is, maybe they should start calling that out during the safety video.
I did see some of those videos, and that was crazy to see that. Eric, I think you had one put up, so I'll let you go next.
Yeah, and I'll just comment on that. If somebody made 10 attempts at 3 different airports, they had a lot of fuel on that airplane before they took off.
That was it was a short hop, so they had plenty of gas.
Wow. All right. This is, I don't think we did tweet of the week last week after the GOES-S launch, but I found this one to be one of the better pictures out there of our new GOES-S satellite being launched out of NASA Kennedy last week. We're all very excited to see the first preliminary and non-operational images coming from GOES-S, and just a beautiful picture. Just a nice evening for that to take off. And here we go. We're ready to have 5-minute imagery from the West Coast to the East Coast.
That's going to be great. I can't wait. Anybody have theirs pulled up next? Yes, go ahead, James. Yes.
So I'll work with that. But to piggyback off of what Eric just shared, I have an image up on the screen here. This was GOES-16 watching its sister satellite launch, and you can see it there in the thermal signature as the rocket takes off. It shows up in water vapor. It may be a little hard to see on the screen share, but essentially you can see that line shoot off the coast of Florida out over the ocean as the rocket with the satellite aboard was ascending into orbit and into space. So very nice image that was captured by one satellite as its sister satellite made its way on up into space to join it.
Shout out to NWS Memphis.
Absolutely. And you know what? I had this tweet on standby because, as Jared speculated, he stole the tweet I was going to use. So it's okay. It's all good.
All right, Ashley, I see you have one up. Go ahead.
All right. I wanted to follow up with the GOES-16 data because we keep talking about this amazing GOES-16. So Brendan was kind enough to share more of that dust storm, smoke, and fire imagery that we're seeing, and I'm so excited about. I pulled up this link, and I actually centered it over Texas and Arkansas this afternoon. And yes, you could find those fires really easily. And I pulled in some of my new firefighter coworkers, and I was showing them, and they are beyond excited. They're like, wow, we have this access to this data. Like, did you buy it? I was like, no, this is just weather data. And I can't wait to work with NWS and also do some observations on my own and see if we can't make this beneficial in fire response, especially when we move into wildfire season.
Really cool. Really cool. I'm going to go because I'm going to break the GOES satellite love that we're giving out tonight. This is from actually the Weather Channel. This was, we think of spring as snowstorms, but there was actually a Category 2 hurricane that struck the Caribbean back in 1908, March 6, 1908. This was a hurricane that struck the area. So that's my tweet of the week. All right. Who wants to go next?
I'll go ahead.
All right, Shay.
This isn't. I did put this out to a tweet, but I wanted to get it onto a bigger screen. And this is the more GOES, right? I mean, we're just excited about GOES, and the new GOES-S is going to come. Preliminary data will be available in about 1.5 months or 2 months. But it's just fascinating what we're able to catch now. This is the global lightning mapper. All the little colored pluses that you see on the right side are part of the warm sector over the Gulf Stream and the warm waters of the Gulf Stream where there's thunderstorms along the cold front. And what's fascinating is you see all these little pluses over here inland along New Jersey, and those are thunder snow lightning strikes. So we're starting to see some really interesting things with the global lightning mapper that we couldn't before. I think some of the radar that we got through radar scope was able to detect some of that, but now the global lightning mapper is catching that now. And just fascinating to see that kind of thing going on now, where we can differentiate one from the other, one from the warm sector, one from the cold sector, and just fascinating stuff. You know, we're really looking forward to seeing more of this, and also with the GOES-S over in the Pacific side. So back to you, Scotty, whoever's next.
All right, Jordan, I'll let you go up. I see you have yours pulled up.
Yeah, I've got one to piggyback off of Shay's. So unfortunately, one of those lightning strikes from all the thunder snow that we've had, a middle school teacher in Ocean County, New Jersey, was struck. Mm-hmm. And she's okay, thankfully, according to this tweet. She's in stable condition at the local hospital. But yeah, lightning is still lightning, so you got to be careful if you're out there enjoying the thunder snow.
Definitely. Watch out, Peter. Be careful.
Yeah. I saw that today. That's not good. And the plow truck's coming around right now. How about that? Breaking news. Anyway, let's show you some of that precipitation we had going on here today. There's a tweet that someone posted. You can see on radar scope. Look how high these precipitation rates were today. This was right near me actually, and I got hit with one of these bands this afternoon. It was coming down pretty good. So I feel really bad for whoever was driving around today, because visibility must have been really, really bad. But you can see anywhere from 61 to 64. So it was really not good. And you could see why we had lightning and thunder too, because storm was really intensifying off our coast today. So it was fun, but yeah, Monday hopefully won't be as bad. We'll see.
Peter, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, we've never had a snow like that here at Charleston. We've gotten fog so thick that you don't know where you are. Like, you have to remember the count of traffic lights, because you can't even see the full scope of the intersection you're in. You're just like, all right, what light am I at? Where am I at? What street? Now they've got road signs hanging on the traffic lights, but back then they didn't. Last time I saw it. But when you get snowed out events, whiteouts, what do people do? They just sit in their car and wait? I mean, do they call 911? I mean, how was the response to that?
Yeah. I actually saw somebody on the side of the road today when it started coming down, because it pretty much just switched all at once. So kind of came as a surprise for everybody, because I think a lot of them thought it wasn't going to switch over that fast, or wasn't going to switch over at all today. It was just going to stay as rain or maybe a mix. But yeah, there was a lot of accidents. A lot of people just pulled over today because just hit all at once. So we're kind of used to this kind of thing, but it doesn't happen that often. We get blizzards more than we get this kind of stuff. So people just don't know how to drive, and they act like idiots. And, I'm sure that happens in every state, but you think we'd be used to that. But no, they just drive like idiots.
By the way, Peter, it's snowing behind you right now.
Yeah, I see. James has put a great background behind me. I look like I'm floating in midair, so it's all good.
It's not over with yet. Oh goodness! And seriously though, we were talking about the wind. One other thing I want to share before we get to the National Weather Podcast Month. I don't know if we shared this. I know Jordan did over the weekend on his personal page, but this was last week at Grandfather Mountain. 102 mile per hour wind gusts was registered on top of Grandfather Mountain over the weekend during the first nor'easter. So I did want to talk about that just briefly, because that is just crazy to see that amount of wind going on. But as we do that, we are going to wrap up the show. This is National Weather Podcast Month, and we'd love for you guys to follow along with us. You can go to weatherpodcastmonth.com, and there's a cool website up there. In fact, if you guys want me to, I'll share that where everybody can see it. Can you guys? Nope, you can't see it. All right, here we go. Now we can. Now you guys can see it. So it's nationalweatherpodcastmonth.com. This is all the participating podcasts: Weather Brains, AMS on Air, In the Elements, the Weather Junkies, Ice Station Houseman, Weather Hype, What Is It About the Weather, Stormfront Freaks. All of us have come together for the month of March. This is the second annual Weather Podcast Month. And so go visit some of our friends and tune into their podcast. There is a schedule button up here that you can click on, and you can find out what the other weather podcast folks are talking about this month. So my internet's being really slow now. But anyways, you can go check out weatherpodcastmonth.com, and feel free to go follow all the other podcasts on Twitter and Facebook, and interact with them and tell them we here at the Carolina Weather Group sent you. And Shay, I know you have been in the email thread with me. Is there anything else I'm missing about Weather Podcast Month?
I think we're going to be doing some audio snippets for Severe Weather Awareness Week and just general weather safety tips. And so be on the lookout for those as well. We'll be sort of peppering those throughout the month in our Facebook feed and also on Twitter, where one of us, probably myself, maybe James, I'm not sure, Ashley, whoever else, some of us will be volunteering to read a few snippets out of some scripts and just to pass on some weather safety tips for everyone out there. And I think that's about it. We're just, these guys do a great job, Phil and men, and those guys do a great job putting this together every year. So second year, by the way. First year went really well. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to finishing out the month. We have some great guests lined up for the rest of the month.
Yes, sir. Shay, next week we have Jonathan Erdman on from the Weather Channel. He'll be our guest. As we go to the next week, it's the Weather Junkies as a part of National Weather Podcast Month. The Weather Junkies will be joining us, and we're going to kind of just talk about weather on that show. And then we close out the end of the month with Todd Lindley from the National Weather Service office in Norman, Oklahoma. We're going to redo the forecast and wildfires show, since the last one Todd was on, the internet kind of crashed in his region. So we're going to have Todd back on to finish his show. But that's it for the Carolina Weather Group. We appreciate you listening tonight and following along. Make sure that you follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and that you are downloading our podcast either on Stitcher or TuneIn Radio, the Apple Store, or even your Google Play Store. You can find Carolina Weather Group there. And as always, if you have any specific topic or guest you would like for us to talk about, shoot us a message and we'll do our best to get them on the show. So for everyone here at the Carolina Weather Group, we hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. Stay warm. Peter, good luck, buddy. We're thinking about you over the next few days. Just think, spring is only a few weeks away.
And it can't get here fast enough.
That's right. Go enjoy a hot Cinnabon. That'll make it feel better.
Yeah.
Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you here next Wednesday night on the Carolina Weather Group.